Alrighty, so we're going to start this off using my old mic. Welcome to Mic Check Mondays. This week, the next 2 weeks actually, are going to be, as I indicated in the stream description, a bit of a grab bag. I'm going to be putting this through its paces. What you are listening to now is my old microphone, and it has less gain than the new one does. The new one, my main concern with the new one is that it is going to be picking up exterior noises, something fierce. Um, oh, I just noticed, and I'm glad I am looking at audio levels. I have to tweak. No, that's not the button I wanted to hit. Advanced audio properties. I want to bump up its decibel gain a smidge because it's, as it is, I have to be like kind of real close to it. I do have a cutoff button, but not on the mic, so it'll make a loud clack every time I try to mute it for something, unless I use my mouse, in which case you'll hear a soft little click. This is a wee widow mouse doing it. Let's bump that up to like 3. Let's see what that looks like. Is that markedly better? It's more. I will fiddle with audio levels. This pops into the red pretty frequently up to the whatever that hits region. But we will switch to the new one presently. And I've got a Kurt Vonnegut story here that I'm going to read. I just realized I forgot to turn off the stream starting soon. That's clever. So this is downloaded from Project Gutenberg. Oh, I forgot to turn on the other mic. Cool, 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 cool. Cool, cool, cool. Give me one sec here as I transition. And there we go. You're now on the new microphone. So it is a short story by Kurt Vonnegut that I raided from Project Gutenberg. So one thing that I ask is that people give feedback, because my tolerance for listening to my own voice recorded is low. Low, comma, space, extremely. I do not like the sound of my own voice when recorded, which is a bit of an irony, to be honest. But I'll do it for you all. This, of course, is problematic in the sense that makes it awfully tough to get better when you don't want to listen to yourself and know how bad you are. Anyway, this is a short story by Kurt Vonnegut called To Be Are Zero To Be, or To Be Are Ought To Be. It is a bit of a bummer, but it is Kurt Vonnegut, so it is a pretty dynamite satire. I had a Vonnegut collection of short stories, and I cannot find it. So I've got to look for that. He's dynamite. I know people have asked for Vonnegut, and for good reason. He's an immensely accomplished author. Wrote some very good stuff. So we're going to just read this one out aloud on our new microphone, at which point I guess I'll probably have to listen to myself read it. Well, we'll figure it out. Hopefully my water drinking is not too loud. Again, the gain... Oh, and I have an open window in order to have any of the cool air that we're getting for the next couple hours. I should probably close that. We'll see how it goes. This is all testing. Expect things to improve somewhat over the next 2 weeks until we have something that resembles a functional finished product. I'll probably do 2 or 3 short stories. I would also like to do like some comic book reading, but I'm realizing that my digital comic book collection is... I totally forgot about all that Image stuff I have. I have a ton of stuff from Image Comics. We'll figure something out. Anyway, without further ado, this is To Be Are Ought To Be, by Kurt Vonnegut. I don't know how to press buttons on important things. There we go. This was originally published when? This e-text was produced from Worlds of If, January 1962. I'm going to record this as well. Let me do that. To Be or Zero to Be by Kurt Vonnegut, Jr. Everything was perfectly swell. There were no prisons, no slums, no insane asylums, no cripples, no poverty, no wars. All diseases were conquered. So was old age. Death, barring accidents, was an adventure for volunteers. The population of the United States was stabilized at 40 million souls. One bright morning in the Chicago Lying-In Hospital, a man named Edward K. Wheeling, Jr. waited for his wife to give birth. He was the only man waiting. Not many people were born a day anymore. Wheeling was 56, a mere stripling in a population whose average age was 129. X-rays had revealed that his wife was going to have triplets. The children would be his first. Oh, not is probably right. Thank you, plunderlings. To be or not to be. I know it's a pun. I knew that much. I'm not going to take it from the top. Young Wheeling was hunched in his chair, his head in his hand. He was so rumpled, so still and colorless as to be virtually invisible. His camouflage was perfect, since the waiting room had a disorderly and demoralized air, too. Chairs and ashtrays had been moved away from the walls. The floor was paved with spattered drop cloths. The room was being redecorated. It was being redecorated as a memorial to a man who had volunteered to die. A sardonic old man, about 200 years old, sat on a stepladder, painting a mural he did not like. Back in the days when people aged visibly, his age would have been guessed at 35 or so. Aging had touched him that much before the cure for aging was found. The mural he was working on depicted a very neat garden. Men and women in white, doctors and nurses, turned the soil, planted seedlings, sprayed bugs, spread fertilizer. Men and women in purple uniforms pulled up weeds, cut down plants that were old and sickly, raked leaves, carried refuse to trash burners. Never, 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 not even in medieval Holland nor old Japan, had a garden been more formal, been better tended. Every plant had all the loam, light, water, air, and nourishment it could use. A hospital orderly came down the corridor, singing under his breath a popular song. "If you don't like my kisses, honey, here's what I will do. I'll go see a girl in purple, kiss this sad world toodaloo. If you don't want my lovin', why should I take up all this space? I'll get off this old planet, let some sweet baby have my place." The orderly looked at the mural and the muralist. "Looks so real," he said. "I could practically imagine I'm standing in the middle of it." "What makes you think you're not in it?" said the painter. He gave a satiric smile. "It's called the Happy Garden of Life, you know." "That's good of Dr. Hitz," said the orderly. He was referring to one of the male figures in white, whose head was a portrait of Dr. Benjamin Hitz, the hospital's chief obstetrician. Hitz was a blindingly handsome man. "Lots of faces still to fill in," said the orderly. He meant that the faces of many of the figures in the mural were still blank. All blanks were to be filled with portraits of important people on either the hospital staff or from the Chicago office of the Federal Bureau of Termination. "Must be nice to be able to make pictures that look like something," said the orderly. The painter's face curdled with scorn. "You think I'm proud of this daub?" he said. "You think this is my idea of what life really looks like?" "What's your idea of what life looks like?" said the orderly. The painter gestured at a foul dropcloth. "There's a good picture of it," he said. "Frame that, and you'll have a picture a damn sight more honest than this one." "You're a gloomy old duck, aren't you?" said the orderly. Is that a crime? Said the painter. The orderly shrugged. If you don't like it here, Grandpa, he said, and he finished the thought with the trick telephone number that people who didn't want to live anymore were supposed to call. The 0 in the telephone number he pronounced naught, which I would have known if I'd actually read this one before. How embarrassing to be caught out live in 4K. The number was to be or not to be. It was the telephone number. It's been so long since I read this, I apologize. It was the telephone number of an institution whose fanciful sobriquets included Automat, Birdland, Cannery, Catbox, De-Louser, Easy Go, Goodbye, Mother, Happy Hooligan, Kiss Me Quick, Lucky Pierre, Sheep Dip, Wearing Blender, Weep No More, and Why Worry? To be or not to be was the telephone number of the municipal gas chambers of the Federal Bureau of Termination. The painter thumbed his nose at the orderly. When I decide it's time to go, he said, it won't be at the Sheep Dip. Do it yourselfer, eh? Said the orderly. Messy business, Grandpa. Why don't you just have a little consideration for the people who have to clean up after you? The painter expressed with an obscenity his lack of concern for the tribulations of his survivors. The world could do with a good deal more mess, if you ask me, he said. The orderly laughed and moved on. Wheeling, the waiting father, mumbled something without raising his head, and then he fell silent again. A coarse, formidable woman strode into the waiting room on spike heels. Her shoes, stockings, trench coat, bag, and overseas cap were all purple, the purple the painter called the color of grapes on Judgment Day. The medallion on her purple musette bag was the seal of the Service Division of the Federal Bureau of Termination, an eagle perched on a turnstile. The woman had a lot of facial hair, an unmistakable mustache, in fact. A curious thing about gas chamber hostesses was that, no matter how lovely and feminine they were when recruited, they all sprouted mustaches within 5 years or so. Is this where I'm supposed to come? She said to the painter. A lot would depend on what your business was, he said. You aren't about to have a baby, are you? They told me I was supposed to pose for some picture, she said. My name's Leora Duncan. She waited. And you dunk people, he said. What? She said. Skip it, he said. That sure is a beautiful picture, she says. Looks just like heaven or something. Or something, said the painter. He took a list of names from his smock pocket. Duncan, he said, scanning the list. Yes, here you are. You're entitled to be immortalized. See any faceless body here you'd like me to stick your head on? We've got a few choice ones left. She studied the mural bleakly. Gee, she said, they're all the same to me. I don't know anything about art. A body's a body, eh? He said. All righty, as a master of fine art, I recommend this body here. He indicated a faceless figure of a woman who was carrying dried stalks to a trash burner. Well, said Leora Duncan, that's more the disposal people, isn't it? I mean, I'm in service. I don't do any disposing. The painter clapped his hands in mock delight. You say you don't know anything about art, and then you prove in the next breath you know more about it than I do. Of course the sheave carrier is wrong for a hostess. A snipper, a pruner, that's more your line. He pointed to a figure in purple who was sawing a dead branch from an apple tree. How about that, he said. You like her at all? Gosh, she said, and she blushed and became humble. That puts me right next to Dr. Hitz. That upsets you? He said. Good gravy, no, she said. It's just such an honor. Ah, you admire him, eh? He said. Who doesn't admire him? She said, worshipping the portrait of Hitz. It was the portrait of a tanned, white-haired, omnipotent Zeus, 240 years old. Who doesn't admire him," she said again. "He was responsible for setting up the very first gas chamber in Chicago." "Nothing would please me more," said the painter, "than to put you next to him for all time, sawing off a limb. That strikes you as appropriate?" "That is kind of what I do," she said. She was demure about what she did. What she did was make people comfortable while she killed them. And while Leora Duncan was posing for her portrait, into the waiting room bounded Dr. Hitz himself. He was 7 feet tall, and he boomed with importance, accomplishments, and the joy of living. "Well, Miss Duncan, Miss Duncan," he said, and he made a joke. "What are you doing here?" he said. "This isn't where the people leave. This is where they come in." "We're going to be in the same picture together," she said shyly. "Good," said Dr. Hitz heartily. "And say, isn't that some picture?" "I sure am honored to be in it with you," she said. "Let me tell you," he said, "I'm honored to be in it with you. Without women like you, this wonderful world we've got wouldn't be possible." He saluted her and moved toward the door that led to the delivery rooms. "Guess what was just born?" he said. "I can't," she said. "Triplets," he said. "Triplets," she said. She was exclaiming over the legal implications of triplets. The law said that no newborn child could survive unless the parents of the child could find someone who would volunteer to die. Triplets, if they were all to live, called for 3 volunteers. "Do the parents have 3 volunteers?" said Leora Duncan. "Last I heard," said Dr. Hitz, "they had 1, and were trying to scrape another 2 up." "I don't think they made it," she said. "Nobody made 3 appointments with us. Nothing but singles going through today, unless somebody called in after I left. What's the name?" "Wheeling," said the waiting father, sitting up, red-eyed and frowsy. "Edward K. Wheeling, Jr. is the name of the happy father-to-be." He raised his right hand, looked at a spot on the wall, and gave a hoarsely wretched chuckle. "Present," he said. "Oh, Mr. Wheeling," said Dr. Hitz. "I didn't see you." "The invisible man," said Wheeling. "They just phoned me that your triplets have been born," said Dr. Hitz. "They're all fine, and so is the mother. I'm on my way to see them now." "Hooray," said Wheeling emptily. "You don't sound very happy," said Dr. Hitz. "What man in my shoes wouldn't be happy?" said Wheeling. He gestured with his hands to symbolize carefree simplicity. "All I have to do is pick out which one of the triplets is going to live, then deliver my maternal grandfather to the happy hooligan, and come back here with a receipt." Dr. Hitz became rather severe with Wheeling, towered over him. "You don't believe in population control, Mr. Wheeling?" he said. "I think it's perfectly keen," said Wheeling tautly. "Would you like to go back to the good old days when the population of the Earth was 20 billion, about to become 40 billion, then 80 billion, then 160 billion? Do you know what a druplet is, Mr. Wheeling?" said Hitz. "Nope," said Mr. Wheeling sulkily. "A druplet, Mr. Wheeling, is one of the little knobs, one of the little pulpy grains of a blackberry," said Dr. Hitz. "Without population control, human beings would now be packed on this surface of this old planet like druplets on a blackberry. Think of it." Wheeling continued to stare at the same spot on the wall. "In the year 2000, said Dr. Hitz, "before scientists stepped in and laid down the law, there wasn't even enough drinking water to go around, and nothing to eat but seaweed. And still people insisted on their right to reproduce like jackrabbits, and their right, if possible, to live forever." "I want those kids," said Wheeling quietly. "I want all 3 of them." "Of course you do," said Dr. Hitz. "That's only human." "I don't want my grandfather to die either," said Wheeling. Nobody's really happy about taking a close relative to the cat box, said Dr. Hitz gently, sympathetically. I wish people wouldn't call it that, said Leora Duncan. What? Said Dr. Hitz. I wish people wouldn't call it the cat box and things like that, she said. It gives people the wrong impression. You're absolutely right, said Dr. Hitz. Forgive me. He corrected himself, gave the municipal gas chambers their official title, a title no one ever used in conversation. I should have said Ethical Suicide Studios, he said. That sounds so much better, said Leora Duncan. This child of yours, whichever one you decide to keep, Mr. Wheeling, said Dr. Hitz, he or she is going to live on a happy, roomy, clean, rich planet, thanks to population control, in a garden like that mural there. He shook his head. 2 centuries ago, when I was a young man, it was a hell that nobody thought could last another 20 years. Now, centuries of peace and plenty stretch before us as far as the imagination cares to travel. He smiled luminously. The smile faded as he saw that Wheeling had just drawn a revolver. Wheeling shot Dr. Hitz dead. There's room for one, a great big one, he said. And then he shot Leora Duncan. It's only death, he said to her as she fell. There, room for 2. And then he shot himself, making room for all 3 of his children. Nobody came running. Nobody, seemingly, heard the shots. The painter sat on the top of his stepladder, looking down reflectively on the sorry scene. The painter pondered the mournful puzzle of life demanding to be born, and, once born, demanding to be fruitful, to multiply and to live as long as possible, to do all that on a very small planet that would have to last forever. All the answers that the painter could think of were grim. Even grimmer, surely, than a cat box, a happy hooligan, an easy go. He thought of war. He thought of plague. He thought of starvation. He knew that he would never paint again. He let his paintbrush fall to the drop cloths below, and then he decided he had had about enough of life in the happy garden of life, too, and he came slowly down from the ladder. He took Wheeling's pistol, ready, really intending to shoot himself. But he didn't have the nerve. And then he saw the telephone booth in the corner of the room. He went to it, dialed the well-remembered number. 2BR02B. Federal Bureau of Termination, said the very warm voice of a hostess. How soon could I get an appointment? He asked, speaking very carefully. We could probably fit you in late this afternoon, sir, she said. It might be even earlier if we get a cancellation. All right, said the painter. Fit me in, if you please. And he gave her his name, spelling it out. Thank you, sir, said the hostess. Your city thanks you. Your country thanks you. Your planet thanks you. But the deepest thanks of all is from future generations. The end. And that was To Be or Not To Be by Kurt Vonnegut. Hopefully the microphone is holding up. Hopefully there isn't too much ancillary sound. I'm sure that the keyboard clacking is very noticeable. Downsides of having a mechanical keyboard, but about the only ones. Other than price, they tend to be kind of pricey. Worth it, though. Nothing beats the feeling of a nice tactile clickety-clack. Excuse me. And because most of my time is spent reading books and not doing video game streaming, it's not as distracting. There are perks. Let's see, I'm just going through my Project Gutenberg archive, which is one I'm eventually going to have to finish getting. I can read a snippet from another book. So there's this kind of goofy book series from, oh gosh, I don't know, the 70s, I think. Here we go. But it's very British. When is this from? 1976. So it's by a guy named Guy N. Smith. They are exceedingly pulpy. It is about a bunch of killer crabs. With a title like Night of the Crabs, that gives you a fair idea of what the book is probably about. It is lurid, it is messy, and giant killer crabs eat people. It's like, what more do you really want in a book at that point? Other than, better writing. Let's see. So I might read an excerpt or two from there. One of those, maybe. Let's see. I've got translations of... I also have a digital copy of Sandworm, A New Era of Cyber War by Andy Greenberg. That one's a classic. It should be a modern classic, I should say. Give me a minute here. I didn't exactly prepare well. I was prepared until like 2 hours before this, and then like I was like, I need to take a nap. I'm tired. It was a long weekend. Let's see. I suppose I could do the first chapter or two of yeah, let's do the start of first couple chapters of Night of the Crabs by Guy N. Smith. How about that? Bit of a grab bag. I can't really do a Welsh accent, so you're not going to hear much that's intentionally Welsh. It's on the Welsh coast. Not everybody there is Welsh. It is very British. There's many British people. Why would I do this? I had it sized and formatted just right. Why would you change it? Ack. Okay. There we go. Better. My head's all stuffy, which doesn't make it easy. Does that fix it? Yes, it does. Very good. It automatically jumped on. What I could also do is like a guessing game where I do... it's not very long. There are, however... how many of these? There's like 8. 8 or more of these Crabs books. So yeah, these are lurid and pulpy. We'll do... How long is the first chapter? A couple pages. 1, 2... Yeah, like 3 pages long. Well, 3 screen scrolls long. That's not the same thing. Anyway, again, these are going to be a messy grab bag as I put the mic through its paces. If people want me to read the rest of the book, we could do that too at some point. But I'm not gonna do it for now. Normally I wouldn't start something I don't intend to finish. But, having only read 1 or 2 of these. Okay, I'm facing away from the mic. I should probably stop doing that. Alrighty. Death was emerging from the sullen sea. Night of the Crabs by Guy N. Smith. Chapter 1. The sunlight sparkled and shimmered on the deep... I'm going to change the size formatting on that. That is way too wide. Sorry. Distracting, I know. Chapter 1. The sunlight sparkled and shimmered on the deep blue of the incoming tide, the waves lapping gently at the harbor wall. Fishing smacks bobbed lazily on the slight swell, and flocks of seagulls screeched noisily as they anticipated the titbits which would be thrown overboard as the latest catch was unloaded. Behind, the range of mountains where the deep green of summer and the purple heather was just coming into full bloom. Ian Wright rested his elbows on the harbor railings and idly watched the outboard motorboat, which served as a ferry between Fairborn and Barmouth, chugging its way across the estuary, leaving a trail of foam in its wake. He was in his early 20s, and his broad, handsome face was already tanned to a deep mahogany after less than a week of exposure to these Welsh coast sea breezes. "Penny for your thoughts." The attractive, red-haired, freckle-faced girl, dressed in jeans and sweater, nudged him in the ribs with her elbow. She was roughly the same age as himself, and her slim, perfectly proportioned figure had already caused many a male holiday-maker to glance in her direction. "Nothing much," he smiled back at her. "I was only thinking how nice it would be to spend another week here instead of going back to London on a Saturday." "Well," she wrinkled her nose, "I must say I agree with you, but I don't think your Uncle Cliff would." I've lost the plot already. "I must say I agree with you, but I don't think your Uncle Cliff would. He would be the first to blow his top if we didn't turn up at the laboratory on Monday morning." "Dear old Uncle Cliff," Ian laughed. "Not so much of the old." Julie slipped an arm around his waist. "He may be one of the country's leading botanists, but he isn't 40 yet. He's very much your mother's younger brother." "You're right," Ian sighed. "Cliff is almost like a brother to me, and he's hip, too, to quote a modern phrase." It's the 70s, I guess you could say that. "And he's hip, too, to quote a modern phrase. He didn't even raise an eyebrow when he discovered that we were going away together for a week. Have a good dirty week," he said as I left on Friday night. "I don't expect you'll be good, but try and be careful. I don't want Julie to have to pack up work just yet. You wouldn't find very many uncles taking that attitude." "Well," Julie winked, "we have been very careful, haven't we? Or at least I hope you have." They both laughed, and then their attention was diverted by a train crossing the estuary over the viaduct a mile away. "One more day," Julie sighed, "and you still haven't taken me to Shell Island. They say the bathing there is superb." "We'll go tomorrow," Ian promised solemnly, and began steering his fiancée in the direction of Davy Jones' locker, a cave-like cafe overlooking the harbor. Saturday dawned with those same cloudless blue skies and blazing sunshine. Ian and Julie were grateful for the coolness of the open 1949 red MG as it glided along the narrow coast roads. Oh boy. I don't know my Welsh pronunciations, so my apologies in advance. After about 20 minutes, Ian slowed down as they approached the small village of Llanbedr, which is not how that's pronounced. It's probably Llanbeder. My Welsh rules are abandoning me. Probably like Llanbedr. I don't know. And noticed a sign off to the left which read, Mochras. "That's Welsh for Shell Island," he shouted above the roar of the engine, and then they were turning off down an even narrower road. Soon the tarmac gave way to rough shale, and they could see the tide already lapping at the edges of the causeway. "What's this?" Julie pointed to some buildings and grass runways which were cordoned off by extensive barbed wire fencing, almost like some concentration camp from the last war. "War Department," Ian said as he slowed down. "Uncle Cliff told me all about it when he heard we were coming here. It's a pilotless aircraft base. See those small planes over there? Well, they fly them by remote control. Oh, very hush-hush, though. You'd need a WD pass in triplicate to get even as far as the first checkpoint. Uncle Cliff said some lads who were camping on Shell Island went on an exploration trip one night and ran into the guards. They nearly got shot and then had to undergo an extensive interrogation before they were allowed to leave with severe warnings ringing in their ears." There are a lot of exclamation points in this, you'll notice. people speak with lots of exclamatory exclamations.
It sounds awfully creepy.
Julie shuddered in spite of the warm sunshine.
Hope we'll be away from here before dark.
No need to worry about that place. Ian saw the water across the road ahead of them, reduced his speed still more, and drove slowly on to Shell Island itself. You'll forget that place even exists when you see the real beauty of Shell Island. Shell Island was a veritable maze of narrow roads with ample parking spaces. Everywhere tents were pitched as campers made the most of the unexpected heat wave. A signpost stated that the south end lay to the left and the north end to the right. Ian swung the steering wheel hard over to the left, noting the sign guiding them to the bathing beaches. Half a mile further on, he turned off the road and parked the car on the top of a steep rise which afforded them a view of the sand dunes and an extensive golden beach beneath.
Isn't it marvelous?
Julie breathed, the welcome stiffening breeze ruffling her auburn hair.
All these people camping here, yet we've almost got the beach to ourselves.
They've probably all had that early morning dip and are snoozing it off. Ian stretched. Now let's have that picnic, and then we'll see how warm the water really is. Half an hour later, clad in their bathing costumes, they were racing across the beach towards the incoming tide, laughing and shouting as they splashed ankle-deep through the white foam.
It's really warm, Julie laughed. Shall we go for a nice long swim?
Suits me. Ian glanced down at the front of his bathing costume. Julie always made him like that, damn her. He thought of stripping off, showing her what she had seen in the bedroom only last night. Why the hell shouldn't he? There wasn't a soul about. All the same, somebody might have a pair of field glasses, and the watcher might be prudish as well as being a busybody and report him. He thought of all the publicity. Uncle Cliff. He shrugged off the thought and splashed after Julie. God, what a figure she had. Enough to make any man want her badly. Really badly. Oh, it gets rather more explicit later. Don't worry. We won't be reading that bit. I won't be editing it out, but I don't plan on continuing that far along. Julie, the water up to the top half of her bikini, turned back to him.
Come on, she yelled. What's keeping you? Race you round the headland. Maybe there's a quiet cove over there where we can...
Ian never heard the rest of the sentence, for with a seductive smile she dived backwards and began kicking out with her legs. Yes, he smiled to himself, maybe there is a quiet little cove just around the headland where we can ellipsis. He plunged into a crawl. Oh, you can see my mouse. That's unfortunate. Let me scooch that away. He plunged into a crawl, losing sight of his fiancée as his head went underwater. He powered on, heading out to sea, about a couple of 100 yards, and then he would veer left, following the coastline, maybe even catching up with her. Julie Coles was a strong swimmer, too. She even matched Ian for speed, and after 10 minutes or so, there were still a good 50 yards between them. Of course, she had got a good start on him. He increased his efforts, clawing at the salt water as he strove to narrow the distance. 10 minutes or so later, he paused. Damn these waves. He couldn't see her. Turn, you fool, turn, he swore inwardly. We're far enough out to sea. Still, she persevered with a direct course. Stupid bitch, he gasped aloud. You'll be too far out. He closed his eyes and mouth as a wave enveloped him. The swell was getting stronger out here. Now he couldn't see her at all. He began to swim desperately. Overtaking her was no longer a game. Their very lives might depend on it. Might depend upon it, even. Occasionally he caught glimpses of her amidst the rising swell. At last. He breathed a sigh of relief. At least she was turning now, even though she had come too far out to sea. He decided to strike out diagonally and head her off. A faint stirring down in his bathing costume told him that things were getting back to normal. Soon they would be lying on the sun-drenched golden sand of some desolate cove, far from prying eyes, where they could strip off and ellipsis. Her shrill scream disrupted his daydreaming. A wave obscured his view of her. Christ, if she got cramp out here. He trod water looking for her. Suddenly, the sea around him was empty. There was no sign of Julie Coles. "Julie!" he yelled desperately, a note of panic starting to creep into his voice. "Julie!" For the first time in his life, he felt completely helpless. She was gone. How the hell was he to look for her here? Strangely, even this far out, the water was comparatively shallow. As he trod water, he realized that he could just touch the bottom. He was above some sort of sandbank. Then he espied a large ripple between the ever-increasing waves heading towards him. He blinked and looked again. There was no doubt about it. It had to be Julie. What a stupid trick. She had screamed to frighten him, and now she was trying to sneak upon him underwater. He rested his feet on the sandy bottom and laughed, almost hysterically. Well, so long as she was all right. Suddenly, he staggered back, his own piercing scream muffled by the water as his head went under. He fought to free himself from whatever it was that had a hold on his left leg that could, comma space, only be compared with a... Okay, there's a bum comma there. He fought to free himself from whatever it was that had a hold on his left leg that could only be compared with a pair of garden shears with serrated blades, biting deeper into the bone with every second. He fell full length onto the seabed, already gulping down mouthfuls of the murky, sandy water. He began to panic, kicking out with his free leg. There was no escape. That much was quite clear to him. Furthermore, he knew that he was going to die. He knew, too, that whatever it was that was attacking him had also claimed Julie Coles. There was a red mist before his eyes. No, it wasn't a mist he could taste it like that time in his boyhood when he'd fallen on the beach and cut his lip. It was blood. For a second, he almost felt that he was free. That grip had lessened. He made one last, desperate effort to surface, being wrenched back instantly as his right leg was grasped by his unknown attacker. It was as consciousness began to slip from his fear-crazed mind that he realized what had happened to his left leg. It had been amputated. Then he felt his right leg cracking. Mercifully, he lost consciousness. Cliff Davenport was in his laboratory shortly before 7 o'clock on that Monday morning. There were certain tasks that had to be attended to before Ian and Julie arrived at 9. Certain specimens from sea plants had to be removed from the glass tanks and allowed to dry before the next stage of discovering their nutritional benefits could be started. They would be ready for his two assistants to get to grips with as soon as they got back from holiday. As he worked, the botanist caught a glimpse of his reflection in the water. He smiled. At least he didn't think that he looked any older. Those lines in his lean, aquiline face marked the passing of his dear wife. They could never be erased, like his memory of her. His receding hairline and the odd flecks of gray in his dark hair were all that denoted his age. His lithe figure was as sprightly as ever, and the pipe drooping out of the corner of his mouth reminded him of the time when he had portrayed Sherlock Holmes in a local amateur dramatic society's presentation of The Speckled Band. His task completed, he retired to his study. There he poured himself a cup of black coffee and relit his pipe. He felt vaguely hungry, but he knew that Julie would automatically prepare him something to eat once she and Ian arrived. The morning wore on, and still there was no sign of Ian Wright and Julie Coles. Cliff became impatient, yet he was not unduly worried. Probably they had lingered over a last night somewhere together and slept late as a result of it. By lunchtime, however, he was becoming increasingly worried. No longer were sexual procrastinations uppermost in his mind. Instead, his thoughts dwelt on road accidents. Ian had always been inclined to drive far too fast in that old heap of an MG of his. It was shortly after 3 o'clock in the afternoon that the doorbell rang. As Cliff Davenport saw the two blue uniforms through the frosted glass, his stomach muscles tightened. The MG. Professor Davenport? The thin-faced sergeant had an expression on his face that boded distinct ill tidings. Yes, yes. Cliff's tone could not conceal his anxiety. I'm afraid, sir, the officer said as he stepped over the threshold without being invited to do so, we might have some rather grave news for you. Might? Well, The policeman shuffled his feet awkwardly. The Marioneth... the Marineth Force have reason... Oh, there's a quote. The Marineth Force have reason to believe that a red MG sports car, registration number MNO897, is the property of Mr. Ian Wright, your nephew, who resides at this address. The vehicle in question was found abandoned on Shell Island. The gentleman in question's clothing was found in it, along with those of a lady. A search has been made, in fact it's still going on. The Coast Guards are using helicopters. They haven't found anything yet. It appears that your nephew and his lady friend have been washed out to sea whilst bathing. Cliff Davenport sat down on a nearby chair. His face was ashen. His whole body trembled. Impossible. His dry croak lacked conviction. I'm afraid, the sergeant began, but stopped as he saw the look in the other's eye. Thank you, Sergeant. Cliff was on his feet as though he had instantly shrugged off the sudden shock. Perhaps you will let me know at once if you find anything. The two policemen stepped outside into the bright sunlight. Both heaved sighs of relief. It had been easier than they had anticipated. The professor had taken the news admirably. Inside the house, Cliff Davenport stood with his back to the closed door. He knew in his heart that he would never see either Ian Wright or Julie Coles again. And that's where we'll leave that for this week. Let's find one more here. I get like an hour of material to work with and see if I can decide how it sounds. I should really start alternating. I'll do that this Wednesday, is I'll alternate between using this new/old microphone I've got and my headset microphone and see how that works. Let's see. No, that's a whole book. Ryan Leinster can be pretty good. We might do that. Let me highlight that. Come on. What is this one? Oh no, that's we're not doing that. Definitely no racism in that one, no sir. Let's see. Oh, come on. Let me see the length of the title, please. Thank you. Ay, 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 ay. I think we did the 4D Doodler on here at one point, so I'm not going to do that one. Oh, I already have that one in here. Cancel. that's going to involve a lot more Irish. I can only do that for so long, I'm afraid. Before I start mangling it even more than I already do. How about this one? This one's kind of long. That's fine. Let's do this one. Here we go. Oop. There we go. Excuse me. One of the difficulties of using this new microphone is it does not have a convenient on-off, so my options are unplug it and replug it, which isn't going to happen. Or I have a hotkey set up, but I have to remember to actually hit it, and it's loud. So I'm going to work some kinks out over the next 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll have some decent audio quality as a result. If I don't like the end result, then I don't like the end result. It's whatever. Again, feedback is appreciated. Okay, so this is Attrition by Jim Wanamaker. Wanamaker? Attrition by Jim Wanamaker. Of course, if man is to survive, he must be adaptable, as any life form must. But that's not enough. He must adapt faster than the competing forms. And on new planets, that can be tricky. Don't do that. The faxgram read, Report Ma M.A. is instanter gravis. You can definitely hear that truck honking. The news obelisk just off the express strip outside Mega Angeles Galactic Survey building was flashing. One of our starships is missing. Report Ma is instanter gravis? I'm not sure if that's supposed to be like... Anyway, going up in the lift, I recalled what I had seen once scrawled upon the bulkhead of a GS trainer. Space is kind to those who respect her. And underneath, in different handwriting, fear is the word, my boy. The look given me by the only other passenger, a husky youngster in GS gray, when I punched the Interstell's level, didn't help. It was on the tip of my tongue to retaliate. Yes, and I'd turn in my own mother if she were a star chaser and I caught her doing something stupid. But I let it ride, obviously. I let it ride. Obviously, it was a general principal's reaction. He couldn't have known the particulars of my last assignment, the seldom kind that had given Interstell its reputation. The loomer over the main entrance glowed. Interstellar Security, Investigation and Special Services Branch, Galactic Survey, North American Federation. At the end of the long corridor between offices was a door labeled Chief Special Agent. I meant to check to see when this was published. That is not helpful. That is the downside of some of the things on Project Gutenberg, is documentation isn't always there. It might be updated now. I've had this for a while. Sorry, my throat. At the end of the long corridor between offices was a door labeled Chief Special Agent. Gravis hadn't changed a bit in the 36 hours since I'd last seen him, a large, rumpled man who showed every year of the 20 he'd spent in Interstell. "It's a nasty job, Ivy." "Always has been," I said, completing the little interchange that had been reiterated so often that it had become almost a shibboleth. I took advantage of his momentary silence. I'd had an hour during the air taxi hop from Xanadu, the resort 200 miles off the coast of California, to prepare my bitter statement. Words come fluently when an earned leave has been pulled peremptorily. We're having a hard morning. Words come fluently when an earned leave has been pulled peremptorily out from beneath you, a leave that still had 29 days to go. But I was brief. The news flasher had cancelled much of the bite of my anger. It took me something under 120 seconds, including repetition of certain words and phrases. Gravis lived up to his name. He didn't bat an eye. He handed me a thin folder. 3 of its sheets were facsimile extrapolations of Probot reports. The 4th was an evaluation and assignment draft. All were from Galactic Survey Headquarters, NAF, in Montreal. The top 3 were identical, excepting Probot serial numbers and departure and arrival times. GSS 231 had been located in its command orbit above a planet that had not yet been officially named, but was well within the explored limits of the space sector assigned NAFGS by the interfederational body. Have I skipped at least a line? No? But was well within the explored limits of the space sector assigned NAFGS by the interfederational body, had been monitored by 3 robot probes, described as being in optimum mechanical condition on 3 distinctly separate occasions. And all devices could be interrogated from outside. That could be interrogated from outside had triggered safe and secure. But no human contact had been accomplished. The 4th sheet, which bore the calligraphy on its upper right corner, "Attention Callum," assumed that the crew of 231, a survey team and con alternate, had met with an accident or series of accidents of undetermined origin and extent in the course of carrying out the duty described as follow-up exploration on the Earth-type planet herein and heretofore designated Epsilon Terra, and must therefore be considered. "The news is," I started to say. "Pure delirium," Gravis interrupted. "Haven't you read paragraph 6? We know exactly where the ship is because it's exactly where it should be. It's the crew that's missing." Paragraph 7 concluded. "We therefore recommend that an agent of experience be dispatched soonest to the designated star system." "Experienced or expendable?" I muttered. "Ivy, after 10 years in Interstell, you should know that experience and expendability are synonymous." Inside the GS section of the lunar complex, I had the occasion to think semantically again. Words like instanter and soonest seldom match their literal meaning when applied to the physical transport of human beings, but in my job, I hadn't even had time to get my G-legs. I stepped off the glide strip in front of the ramp marked Outgoing Personnel, handed the efficient-looking redhead my Q-chit and ID, and said, "Priority 1. "Quarantine, okay," she checked, smiling. "Feeling antiseptic?" I had to admit, privately, that I did not. As applied to her, the term coveralls, regulation, gray was strictly a euphemism. Perhaps it was the combination of low gravity and controlled conditions that made lunatics of female persuasion blossom so anatomically. Or maybe she was a plant, a deliberate psych experiment to put outbound starmen in a particular frame of mind. She flashed my identification on the screen, took a long look, and became coldly efficient. Callum, Ivor Vincent, age 40, height 5'8", weight 142, hair brown, eyes green, rank special agent Interstell. "You look much older, Mr. Callum." She consulted her assignment list. "Lock 3. I snapped the identiflake back in its bracelet, picked up my jump bag and briefing kit, and headed up the ramp, feeling more eyes than the redheads. The anonymity of a GS working uniform hadn't lasted very long. By the time I was able to capture enough breath to make coherent sounds, the shuttler was already approaching parking orbit. The pilot had used maximum grav boost, and the trip must have crowded the record. "That wasn't exactly SOP, was it?" "Priority 1, sir," the youngster replied, showing teeth wolfishly. I was still trying to think up an adequate rebuttal when I came out of the airlock and into the ship. Then I felt better. P1 means, among other things, first available transportation. But this giant was the newest type, crammed to the buffers with the results of science's latest efforts to make star voyageurs as safe as express strip commuters inside a Terran dome. Even the vibrations of the great Gatch-Spitzer-Melnikov generators, building towards maximum output, had been dampened to a level more imaginary than tangible. Internal gravity was momentarily in operation, as an additional blessing. And, walking down the blue-lit corridor toward astrogation, I could feel the occasional metallic thermal thump that meant the IP drive was hot and critical. I got a second lift when I saw who was bending over the robopilot console. Antonio Moya, Mexico City's gift to Galactic Survey some 35 years earlier. A café con leche type with shrewd eyes, nervous hands, silver-streaked hair that showed a defiance of geriatric injections, a slight, wiry body that couldn't have gone more than 120 pounds at 1.0 G, and probably the best master spaceman extant. Only discipline kept the grin off my face, but he was on the horn, getting traffic clearance, so I didn't interrupt. The others were unknowns, the sort characterized by old spacers as pretty boy, recruitment ad types, but they looked competent. I figured a medic and a spread of ratings, counting Moya a basic GS unit. I'd expected both a con crew and a standby. Either this was the total of available personnel, or the brass had decided not to risk more men than absolutely necessary. If I'd had illusions about the assignment, they would have faded at that instant. It's this way in Interstel. You're taught to be a loner. You're expected to have absolute confidence in your own abilities and complete skepticism about the talents of others. You're supposed to be suspicious, cynical, courageous, and completely trustworthy. And you're not expected to have friends. Which, obviously, in the light of the aforementioned and part of what is yet to come, could serve as the definition of redundancy. You're required to weed out incompetence wherever you find them without prejudice, mercy, or feeling. The standing order is survival, yet you are expected to lay down your life gladly if the sacrifice will save one pink-cheeked, short-time assistant teamer who gives the barest suggestion that he might someday grow up to be a man and repay the thousands of credits squandered upon his training in that profound hope. Which, stated another way, has become the 11th commandment of special agents. Remember the body corporeal and keep it inviolate. And, if the reaction of the rank and file of Galactic Survey to Interstel is used as criterion, is the best-kept secret in the explored physical universe. The agent's burden, Gravis calls it. Moya's jaw dropped when he caught sight of me. Apparently, he had been told only to expect an agent, but he recovered quickly. "Hello, Callum," he barked. "I won't say it's a pleasure. Stow your gear and strap down." The klaxon sounded stridently, and the inflectionless voice of the robopilot said, 60 seconds. I got into the indicated G-couch and squirmed around, seeking some measure of comfort. It had been designed for a much larger man, and I gritted my teeth in the expectation of taking a beating. After a bruising few minutes, we went weightless. Then the servos put us back on internal gravity, and the crew unstrapped. They ignored me studiously. It wasn't entirely bad manners. There's plenty to be done in the interval prior to the first hop, and it isn't all just checking coordinates and programming Master Con. The usual space plan calls for several accelerations and a lot of distance between Terra-Luna proximity and solar system departure. But space regs are disregarded on Priority 1 missions, so, for probably less than an hour, things were going to be busy in astrogation. I retrieved my kit and looked for an unoccupied cubicle. GS starships are designed to accommodate 24 men in reasonable comfort, a figure arrived at more historically, the sum of experience, than arbitrarily as the minimum number necessary for the adequate exploration of a new star system. It breaks down this way: 6 men to a team, 4 teams maximum, 3 for planetary grounding, 1 for ship's con. Since any given team can do either task, they are interchangeable. Who gets which depends upon rotation. 3 for exploration, then, because averages spread over several generations of interstellar capability bear out the fact that mother primaries generally possess no more than 3 planets that are in the least amicable to humans. I was more than cursorily familiar with the drill. The basic requirement for Interstell is 5 years' service with a survey team. I'd spent 9, which is another reason for general GS enmity, the turncoat syndrome. That and the fact that prospective agents are not even considered unless they rate in the top 1% in service qualification and fitness reports. The jealousy angle. I'd known Moya from my last regular duty ship. I'd worked up from assistant under his tutelage. I'd been ready for the Team Coordinator Master Spaceman exams when I'd applied for transfer. Moya had raged for hours, but he'd given me a first-rate recommendation. Call it service pride. Have I read this before? Some of this seems familiar. Excuse me. I was just getting a start on the vid tapes when the cubicle's panel dilated and Moya stamped in, bristling like a gamecock. "What's all this about Epsilon Terra?" I removed the ear bead and grinned at him. "Hello, Tony, you old space dog. You're looking fine. What happened? Did they pull you off leave too?" He held the acid face until the panel closed. Then he brightened a little. At least he didn't refuse my proffered hand. He stood, fists on hips, glaring at me. Finally, he growled, "I had hopes you'd wash out. When I heard you'd made it, I was plenty disappointed." He shook his head. "You seem healthy enough, but I still think it's a waste of a good spacer." And that, apparently, was as close as he was going to come to saying that he was glad to see me again, because, in the next breath, he reverted to Starship Master. "Now let's have the Nexus. All I know is that I got orders to round up a short crew, was handed a space plan with coordinates that were originally filed for GSS 231 a few months back, with an ultimate destination of a planet I orbited 5 years ago." "You've been there?" "I just said so, didn't I? Don't they teach you vacuum cops to listen?" I gave him the background. He nodded soberly a couple of times, but his only comment was, "I heard rumors." Then he said, "That's all I've got time for now. We make our first jump shortly. That'll take us to where 231 went on GSM. From there on out, we follow our plan precisely." "Until we locate and grapple, Tony, then we start making our own mistakes." "I don't doubt that." Moya moved to leave, paused, and said over his shoulder, "What's this about old Ben Stewart being cashiered for misconduct?" "It's true." His back stiffened, and his hands clenched. He turned to face me again. "I went through the academy with Ben. How about doing me a favor, for old time's sake? Tell me who it was that put the finger on him. Just give me a name. I might spot it sometime on a register." I figured there was no sense prolonging the agony. "Okay. Ivor Vincent Callum." Moya's face blanched. He took a backward step and uttered something under his breath that sounded like the Spanish equivalent of... He turned abruptly, opened the panel, and stalked out. Somehow I expected him to come back and ask for details, but he didn't show. I didn't dwell on the trip. Any schoolboy who watches Tri-D space operas can quote chapter and verse and use phrases like paraspace hops and rip psyche phenomenon as trippingly as, "Hey Joey, let's play swap strip." Citizens from Venus and Mars vacationing on Terra speak knowingly, too, whenever they can bring themselves to cease complaining about the gravity, crowded conditions, and regimentation, and can squelch the bragging about how well they're doing on good old whatever. But don't let them kid you. GSM drive is restricted to interstellar transport. Colonists from the nearer systems are picked people, stiff-backed pioneers who don't sob to come home every time their particular planet completes a circuit around its primary. And, when they do return, they're generally too busy lobbying for essentials to bother telling tall tales. So, comparatively few people are really familiar with starships and the ins and outs of paraspace. Ask a starman, you won't have any trouble recognizing one, even in Mufti. Or, better yet, get a spool labeled The Conquest of Paraspace, a history of the origins and early application of star drive. It's old, but good, and it was written especially for laymen. I'll say this. It took about a week. Sure, paraspace hops are, to all intents and purposes, instantaneous, but there is a limit to the capacity of the GSM drive, and regulations restrict the jumps to a toleration well within that capacity. We might have made it sooner had we not been bound to follow 231's space plan, but not much. Once a plan has been filed, only an emergency can justify deviation. So, if you'll pardon the expression, let's just say that interstellar distances are astronomical. Every time we came back into objective space, and I'd managed to recapture my soul, I applied myself to the tapes. I got little from Moya, and not because of enmity. Even after refreshing his memory, he couldn't offer much. Although he had been master of the ship that had first remarked E.T., he hadn't set foot upon its surface. The planet was comparatively undistinguished. It was about the size of Melna Terra, and had an atmosphere with a good balance of nitrogen and oxygen, plus carbon dioxide, argon, etc., was mostly surface water, yet offered polar ice caps and a reasonable land area, as taken in the aggregate, although present in the form of scattered insular masses. The largest of these, about half the size of Terra's Australia, was a comfortable number of degrees above the equator, and had been selected as representative for detailed examination. Briefly, standard terrain, a balance between mountains, desert, and plain. Flora, varied. Fauna, primitive. Plenty of insect life, enough to keep an entomologist occupied for years, but not much for specialists in the other branches of zoology. Warm-blooded creatures comparatively rare. And, according to the original survey team, nothing bacterial that had overburdened Doc Yakamura's polyvalent vaccine, the kind of planet that pleased Galactic Survey because it looked promising for future colonization come the day and the need. The type that skeptics like me view with grave suspicion, I told Moya, like saints, women of unblemished reputation, heroes, politicians, and all interstellar agents, Tony offered dryly. In the interim, since the divulgence of my part in the Stewart affair, Moya had thawed somewhat. After all, he and I had been friends at one time, and the present situation held no brief for head-on personality clashes. The phrase, all in the same boat, applies with particular meaning to spacers. Tony undoubtedly... The lips, the tip of the tongue, the teeth. Where were we? Tony undoubtedly figured that 231 might have been his ship. He even went so far as to express an interest in seeing E.T. from the ground level. I work alone, Tony, I said, but thanks for the offer. Tell you what, I'll strike a compromise. If I get into serious trouble, it'll be you I shout for. All right? Moya scowled. Probably a wild goose chase anyway. But he said it without enthusiasm. It reads like this. Regs require that messenger vehicles be returned to the solar system on their miniature equivalents of paraspace drive, periodically, with complete information as to conditions encountered, work in progress, etc. None had been received from 231. There's a joke, not at all funny, I'll admit, that concerns itself with this situation. It ends with the opening lines of the GS Memorial Service. The last skull work I did was to familiarize myself with the personal dossiers of each of 231's crew, paying particular attention to psych reports. It's a part of my job that I've never liked, but I recognize the necessity. The crew seemed fairly typical. The average was relatively inexperienced, the sort you'd expect on the type of assignment that was often used as advanced training. I managed to single out several possibles, men who might crack depending on the gravity of the situation. The captain designate wasn't one of them, nor was the survey team coordinator. GSS 231 was on station, big and reflective and innocently ominous, held methodically by Robopilot in an orbit that matched exactly the rotation of Epsilon Terra, precisely over the largest landmass. Moya conned us in like a dream, paralleled, rectified, grappled, and mated locks. I showed up in astrogation in a full pressure suit, carrying the helmet. The crew gawked, and somebody snickered. "You think it's silly, do you?" Moya snapped. "Better flush your side as soon as I get clear," I advised. Moya nodded, lowered and secured the helmet, checked lines, and rapped OK. An hour later, I still didn't feel silly. I had the helmet open now. I sat in front of the communications console. Moya responded as if he had been waiting with his finger on the stud. I didn't have to specify taping. All Starship radio traffic is automatically recorded. "Level okay?" I asked. "Yes, man. What's the story?" Interlock and compartments. Interlock and all compartments. Air pressure, density, temperature, and purity optimum. All intrinsic gear optimum. 3 shuttler berths vacant. Hold shows standard environmental equipment for 1 team gone. Messenger racks full, no programming apparent, absolutely no sign of crew. Repeat, I got it. Have you checked the log? Who's doing this, you or me? I figured they could edit Moya's comment. The log was strictly routine. Space plan had been followed exactly. Arrival had been on schedule. Survey team had been dispatched with minimum delay, had reported grounding and camp establishment without incident, had relayed particulars of commencement operations. Until the last entry. It was eerie listening to the emotionless voice of 231's skipper. Sub-entry 1, date, same, time 22:05 Zulu. No contact with base camp. Surface front negates visual. Am holding dispatch of M1. Will wait until next scheduled report time before action. There was no sub-entry 2. I broke the recorder seal, reversed and played back the comm tapes. There wasn't much. Distance obviates any talkie-talkie from ship to base once the solar system has been cleared. What I learned was simply a substantiation of what I'd already surmised. I cut off when I heard a familiar voice say, 250 from 231. Moya helped me strip off the pressure suit. No matter what the physio manuals say, there's room for improvement. Nothing beats your own skin. He trailed me into the gear compartment. I returned the suit to its clips and began sorting through the welter of what the well-dressed spacer wears for a big bug rig somewhere. Oh my gosh. I returned the suit to its clips and began sorting through the welter of what the well-dressed spacer wears for a bug rig somewhere near my size. The tag is not completely adequate. It's a lightweight outfit, with intrinsic filters and odds, designed to be worn under conditions that involve the suspected presence of dangerous bacteria or harmful gases. Its efficacy does not extend beyond the limits of reasonable atmosphere. Now don't start jumping to conclusions, I told Moya. All I know is that whatever happened quickly and down below. From the weapons chest, I selected a little W&R 50 and the biggest clip I could find. 50s aren't much for range, but they are unconditionally guaranteed to make a creature the size of a triceratops think twice before heading in your direction again, and once you strap one on, you never feel the weight. That's why, even though they are officially obsolete, you can generally find a brace in most starship arsenals. Remind me to report the maintenance gang of this hunk for stocking unauthorized weaponry. You would, too, Moya said. On the way back to the lock, I told him, let's save time by not making a duplicate recording. I'll transmit additional information and intent going down. There's one shuttler left in 231, so I'll use it. If I find I need something that isn't in the shuttler, I'll fetch myself. Under no circumstances are you or any of your boys to leave this ship without my say-so. What happens if... You've had 30 years of deep space, Tony. Am I supposed to tell you your job? Go by the book. Either launch another messenger and sit tight for instructions, or get out and risk a board inquiry, depending. You can rot down there for all of me. Thanks a pile. Make certain your crew understands. I wouldn't want any of them getting their pretty hands dirty. But I didn't feel so cocky going down. I hadn't the least idea of what to expect. Sure, I'd gleaned something from the comm tapes, the unsuccessful attempts to contact the survey team at base camp, the happy-go-lucky report from the kid sent in Shuttler 2 to investigate, saying that the camp was deserted but everything looked fine, just fine, the unsuccessful attempts to recontact him, and then a blank except for my own voice. Apparently, the skipper had followed with the rest of the con crew. I could even guess why he had failed to make additional entries in the log, or not transmitted from the camp in lieu thereof. He figured it was something he could work out himself, and he didn't want anything on record to show that he had broken regulations. He wanted to keep the errors of personnel under his command, and his own, in the family. He figured, after the situation was resolved, that he could make cover entries and nobody's slate would be soiled. What is this? Give me a sec. Okay. Oops, went past it. The camp was at the edge of a plain marked Hesitation on the chart. I plucked a scrap of verse out of my mind. On the plains of hesitation bleach the bones of countless millions, who, when victory was dawning, sat down to rest, and resting, died. I wondered how prophetic that was going to be. I grounded within yards of the other 3 shuttlers. They were parked neatly parallel. Their orderliness made my scalp prickle, and I was sweating long before I got into the bug suit, squeezed out of the tiny lock, and set foot on Epsilon Terra. Excuse me. The sky was blue, naked except for a tracing of tenuous clouds. I could see neither of the starships. I wonder if you can imagine how it feels to be on a planet so far away from the solar system that the term trillions of miles is totally inadequate. If you can grasp even a bit of it, then add the complications of a small but insistent voice inside your head that keeps telling you that no matter where or how far you go, you're not... Let's just say it gives your sweat an odor and your mouth a taste that makes you want to look over your shoulder all the time. I walked the 100 yards to the white plastidome, avoiding the few bulbous plants and tussocks of short yellow grass that dotted the dry plain. Through the odd cells of the suit's hood, I could hear the light buzzing of insects that served only to heighten the overbearing quiet of the area. The port was closed. Inside, everything was correct, except for the little dirt brought in on boot soles during erection and subsequent goings and comings. There was a packet of Nutritabs lying open on an empty crate that had been pressed into service as a table. Someone had fortified himself before trekking off into the nearby bush. There was much equipment still sealed in cartons. Bunks were made up. Tucked under the blanket of one was a little book with stylus attached. All pages were blank except the first. The entry read, TC in a sweat to get going. Rain potential. No rest for the weary. This seems to be a nice spot, though. Am kind of eager myself to take a look at some of the vegetation hereabouts. Have several ideas along the lines of Thompson's prelim research concerning extraction of... I replaced it under the blanket. I was ready to give odds that each of the previous finders had done the same. The kid that had arrived in Shuttler 2 and probably 231's skipper, and each from the same motive. He'll be back. After all, a diary is a personal thing. I went back outside, shut the port, and made a complete circuit of the camp. I looked into each of the 3 shuttlers. I found nothing that could offer the least positive clue to the fate of the 12 men from 231. I returned to Shuttler 4, beamed Moya, and filled him in, forcing myself to be cheery. "How's everything upstairs?" "Right now we're having a little zero-G drill. Keeps the boys alert." "Good idea. Now here's my plan. I've got 10 hours of daylight left, so I'm heading out into the bush. Figure departure in 5 minutes. Weather has obscured signs, but I don't think I can go wrong by following my nose and taking the shortest route. I'm traveling light, just the bug rig, the W&R, belt kit, and the minicom. I'm going to set up this transceiver to record and transmit on command response. I suggest you interrogate every hour on the hour from now on. Catch 'em?" I broke off, made the necessary adjustments, strapped the minicom on my wrist, and exited the shuttler. The antiseptic air that I drew into my lungs was beginning to seem inadequate. I felt slippery all over, and there was a cottony taste in my mouth. I made it to the start of the bush in 15 minutes. Don't be misled into picturing jungle. There was a variety of vegetation, including trees, but none of it was what you'd call heavy going. Beyond somewhere was a stream, significant enough to be noted on the chart as first water, and several miles from the camp was the start of a series of rolling hills. Blue in the distance was a chain of mountains, the Guardians. The overall impression was of peaceful, virgin wilderness. The original survey team had made its camp in the relative frankness of the plain, then, after preliminary tests, had moved to higher ground, specifically the lee side of one of the nearer hills. They had cleared an area, using heat sweepers to destroy encroaching vegetation, and RF beams to disenchant the local insect population. Insects there were, a regular cacophony of buzzings, chirpings, and monotonous mutterings. By the time I'd reached the bank of the stream, I'd lost track of individual varieties. The stream was a bare trickle. The bed was spongy and dotted with tall, spare plants that resembled horsetails. I negotiated the 50 feet to the opposite bank without difficulty. I threaded through a thicket and came out into a brief expanse of savanna. There I found the first evidence of the fate of 231's people. It was a small object, oval, flattened, the color of old ivory. Although I hadn't been walking along with my head under my arm, it took me a moment to tumble to what I'd discovered. Then my hair tried to stand on end. I rid myself of it and used the minicom for the first time. Speaking to a recorder was altogether too impersonal for what I had to report. "I've just found a patella, a human kneecap. I'm about 100 feet beyond the far bank of the stream in almost a straight line from the camp. I'm in grass about 2 feet tall. I'm casting about now, looking... Hold it. Yes, it's scraps of a gray uniform. More remains. Here's a femur. Here's a radius ulna. The bones are clean, scattered. Evidence of scavengers. No chance for a PM on this one." I got out the chart from its case on the suit's belt, X'd the location, and went on, feeling more lonely all the time. It wasn't that I was it wasn't that I was unconversant with the physical evidence of death. I've marked corpses on planets you've probably never heard of. Corpses resulting from disaster, unavoidable accident, stupid error, and even murder. What I've learned is that you never get used to coming face to face with human death, even when its manifestation is the inscrutable vacancy of bare bones. You can put this down, too, and think what you want about incongruity. I was angry. Angry with the spacer that had gotten himself catapulted into eternity so far from home. Angry with myself for having assumed before leaving the Interstell office in Mega Angeles that this is what I would find. Angry because the assumption had done nothing to prepare me for the reality. No space padre would have admired what I said inside the bug suit's hood, nor the refinements that grew more bitter with each new discovery. Within 3 hours, I'd accounted for all 12 of 231's missing crew. The search had led to and beyond the hillside where the original team had made its second and permanent camp. In one place, I found enough to separate 4 skeletons of men who had fallen within a few feet of each other. The rest were randomly located. There was a small plant growing up through the hole in the left half of a pelvis. Somehow it looked obscene, and I had to fight the impulse to tear it out. But it was simply one of many, struggling for survival, that I'd seen growing here and there throughout the area, a species that seemed to bear a familial kinship to those that sprinkled the plain. There was equipment. Field kits, a mini-lab, a couple of blasters, each showing full charge. Cause of death? That was the enigma. So far I'm stumped, I said into the mini-comm. I've retrieved a few scraps of uniform bearing stains. Maybe analysis can discover something. The tapes say that ET's birds and mammals are comparatively rare, but comparative doesn't mean much in the light of what I've seen. So far, though, everything I can come up with seems totally inadequate. Bacterial invasion, animal attack, insect incursion. None were problems with the first survey gang, so why should they be now? Rule out gas poisoning or allied concomitants. The suit tab shows white. Speaking of that, I'm peeling now. Keep your fingers crossed. The air was warm and still, heavy with the ubiquitous smells and sounds of wilderness. I was in the approximate area of the first team's camp. As per custom, they had struck the plastidome, dismantled the scanners, power panels, and other reusable equipment, and destroyed the debris of occupancy. The clearing had repaired itself, but for the light concavities on the hilltop that marked shuttler settlings, there was little to indicate their previous presence. I sat down and waited. The suicide complex has never been a part of my psyche, but there are times when you have to place yourself in jeopardy. It's occupational, and I've got the gray hair, worry lines, and scars to prove it. I waited for 3 long hours. The sweat dampness of my uniform evaporated, only to be replaced by the stains of new perspiration. I sucked in great gulps of ET's air and found it consistently comfortable in my lungs. Insects came, investigated, and retreated, mostly because of urging. I was not approached by anything larger than a line of creatures the size of... Voice sounds different, but of a higher noise floor, white noise. Yeah, there is indeed greater white noise. I'm going to work with that. This microphone is old, so it doesn't have the automatic dampers associated with most modern technology. This is from Jesus. When did I get this? I don't know. This might be 90s vintage. Well, no, this has a USB 2. It probably is not 90s vintage. It might be early aughts. It's old. It's at least 15, 20 years old. I'll see if I can find out how old. but I don't know for sure. It's a Samson. Not a Samsung, but a Samson. Well, that's the stand, anyway. I think the microphone itself is a Samson as well. Yeah, the microphone itself is a Samson as well, yes. If the white noise, I mean, partly I've got a window open, so that's going to add to the white noise factor, and I'm not recording in a secure room. I'm going to have to listen to this afterwards and find out. Okay, let's, how much more of this story exists? There's no scroll bar, so I can't easily see. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 pages. Okay. 9 more pages, rather. Excuse me. I'll have to find where it is. Here it is. Okay. I was not approached by anything larger than a line of creatures the size of Okay, I don't know how that's pronounced. Vicky Terran? Whatever. I was not approached by anything larger than a line of creatures the size of Vicky Terran militants. Oh, I get it. Militants. They're ants, probably. I was not approached by anything larger than a line of creatures the size of Vicky Terran militants, and I was able to avoid them by evasive action. As far as I could determine, I wasn't invaded by anything microscopic or submicroscopic either, because at the end of the 3 hours I felt nothing beyond the personal infirmities that I'd brought with me. The definite decline of E.T.'s son forced me to give up. The walk back to the plane wasn't entirely fruitless. I found something that I'd overlooked previously, the scattered remains of a small vertebrate. Many of the bones were missing. What happened to you? I mused. Did you come for a meal and got killed by a larger animal? Or were you caught in the same disaster that... There was no way to tell. What was it about Epsilon Terra that could accept one survey team for months of occupancy that had involved detailed examinations of the region within miles of the plain and the hillside, and cursory examination of thousands of square miles of the rest of the insular mass by air, including touchdowns at key points for short stays, and that 5 years later could entice, enmesh, and destroy the entire complement of a modern starship indiscriminately within a matter of hours? It was late afternoon when I reached the camp. I was tired, dirty, thirsty, hungry, and thoroughly frustrated. I drank from a previously unopened water bowser and wolfed several Nutritabs. Then I stumbled over to the shuttler, secured the recorder and interrogation setup, raised the starship, and brought Moya up to date. I'm going to move this vehicle to the hillside and spend the night there. I figure I'd better give E.T. a full 26-hour rotation interval to come up with something before the next step. Tomorrow I'm going to need a man down here to witness the location and disposition of the corpses. You know the drill. It's your decision whether they should be identified singly, if possible, and secured for removal to Terra, or whether they should be interred here commonly. My recommendation is to make a film record and plant them, but I'm too tired to argue. One thing more. Whoever you send, if he gives me any lip, I'll cut him down like a small tree. There's been enough mistakes made here already. I spent the night in the shuttler. Call it an atavistic response to the unknowns of darkness. It was a restless interval between dusk and dawn. Occasionally I illuminated the hillside and surrounding area. A couple of times I glimpsed the eye reflections of small animals. They seemed to possess the shyness of most nocturnal creatures, but I couldn't help wondering. Morning dawned gloomily. There was a light mist hanging over the stream bed, and much of the sky was turgid with clouds. I gave the starship the go-ahead and specified dispatch because of the threatening weather. Moya mentioned plastibags, a filmer, and a porto digger. His decision was obvious. I figured it wise, but had the uncomfortable picture of a GS representative trying to explain the reasons to bereaved relatives. I spent a few moments going over meteorological details. As I recalled from the tapes, this was the rainy season. Judging from the look of the area, it could use precipitation. Things were growing, but the stream was mostly dry, and the plain seemed parched. Apparently, the mountains blocked much of it. Sitting on hands has never been my delight, so I exited the shuttler and went down the hill for another look-see. Insects buzzed noisily. The air seemed heavy and oppressive, but nothing had changed. There was no evidence of the creatures I'd seen during the night. It took about an hour for the shuttler from 250 to show. From 250 to show. In the interval, several things happened. The first was a perceptive darkening of the sky, followed by a light preliminary shower. I'd anticipated that, and was considering heading back for the bug suit when the second occurred. I'm not going to offer excuses. From the advantage of retrospection, you can say what you want about slipshod detective work. The point remains that I'd covered the area more than cursorily and had not encountered anything specifically dangerous. The timing was pure luck. The shuttler penetrated the overcast about 10 miles off target, located, and started its approach. And something bit me on the leg. I pulled up my pants leg immediately, hoping to catch the culprit, but saw nothing save a thin red line about an inch long. It looked more a scratch than an insect bite, but I hadn't brushed against anything. The shuttler grounded on the hilltop, and I headed up. Perhaps it was the exertion that speeded the reaction. There was no pain, only a local numbness. Before I'd traveled 10 yards, my leg from the knee almost to the ankle felt prickly asleep. I paused and looked. There was no swelling, no other discoloration. I heard a raspy voice from the hilltop. "Are you going to give me some help, or do I have to haul all this gear myself?" Despite the leg, I didn't know whether to laugh or explode. Moya was rattling around in an outsized bug suit and carrying the biggest moral blaster contained in a starship's arsenal that could still be called portable. "What in condemned space are you doing here?" I shouted. I was ready to give it to him right off the top. Oh, jeez. My brain separated that into a separate sentence. I was ready to give it to him right off the top of the regs about the relationship between ship's master and agents on assignment and the responsibilities of command, but the leg chose that moment to fail. Until then, I hadn't really been worried. I fell forward against the pitch of the slope, caught myself with my arms, and rolled over on my back. I hit my left thigh with my fist and felt absolutely nothing. Massage didn't help. I heard Moya panting down the brow of the hill. "Keep away!" I shouted. "Get back to the ship!" Moya bent over me. He had opened the hood of the bug suit, and his face was grave. "What's the trouble, Callum? Can't you take orders?" He shook his head. I pointed to the leg. He looked swiftly at the broken skin. "How does it feel?" "That's the trouble. It doesn't." He grabbed my arm, put it over his shoulder, and got me on my feet. We made good time, considering. "Too bad you're such a shrimp," I said. "I can take you on any time." Shuttler 4 was closest, parked on a shelf 50 yards below the top of the hill, but Moya was heading to miss it. "I programmed for auto just in case, and the generators are up to power. We waste time to save time. That way I can give you some help on the ascent." The generator part was fine. The rest wasn't. It started to rain again, just before we reached 250's shuttler. I put my face up to it. Moya got me through the lock and onto an acceleration couch. Then he headed for the panel. I was beginning to feel a desperate weakness, but my head was still clear. "Wait a minute," I said. What's your G tolerance? High, but... So strap me and raise this couch to vertical, then override the auto and take us up fast. He blinked. Listen, I said, this feels like a neurotoxin. Remember snakebite aid? Well, the numbness is up to my groin now. No place for a tourniquet, and nothing here for freezing. It was strange going up. I blacked out almost immediately, but Moya took it flat and apparently stayed alert all the way. Space! I managed to gasp finally. Any more of that sort of thing and I'd have ended up stupid. Then there was utter confusion. I came to full awareness under the luminescence of the infirmary's overhead. I was naked on the padding of the table. I could see a respirator off to my right and a suction octopus near it. The medic was just stowing an auto heart. But for a different tingling in my leg and an all-is-lost sensation south of my diaphragm, I felt reasonably sound. The medic approached. I hadn't gotten a very good impression of the lean, blonde youngster on the trip out, but now he seemed Hippocrates, Luke, Lister, Salk, O'Grady, and Yakamura all rolled into one. He weakened it by asking the classic redundancy. How do you feel? I elbowed up for a look at the leg. There was a series of little welts the length of it, masked by force heal. Where did you learn your trade? I asked. In a production expediter's office? He grinned. It took more than 3 hours, Mr. Callum. Suction, flushing, full transfusion. You've got some good blood in you now. I lay back and let him talk. There'll be nerve damage, probably. Regeneration should take care of most of it, but you might need transplants. You were lucky. First, that whatever nipped you barely broke the skin. Second, that the skipper was there to help. And third, that you have the sense to block the spread of the toxin by G-forces. Yeah, remind me to thank Moya immediately after I write him up for leaving his station. The medic looked pleased. Well, now, the way I got it, and I believe the recorder will bear me out, is that you requested a witness. You left it up to the skipper to make the selection. He cleared his throat. And by the way, Moya said he'd look in on you after a bit. The thing to do now is rest. I sat up again. Where are my clothes? The kid commenced noises of disapproval. Damnation, I'm not going anywhere. I just want to look over that pants leg. Came the dawn. What did you say Moya was doing? Oh, I expect he's busy up forward. The trouble was that he looked me straight in the eye. It takes practice to lie convincingly. And the Space Academy doesn't list the art of prevarication among its curricula. That misbegotten little son of an Aztec, he went back down, didn't he? I tried to jackknife off the table. The medic flexed his muscles and said, I can't take the responsibility. When are you people gonna get it through your stubborn heads that the responsibility for this whole shebang is mine and mine alone? 2 more of the crew showed up. Under other circumstances, I might have enjoyed tangling with them. I know tricks that even the inventors of karate overlooked. All right, I gasped, but give me the dope. He's not alone, is he? Are you in contact? It developed that Moya had returned to the site of the disaster immediately upon learning that I was out of danger. He'd taken a crewman. He was also equipped with my chart of the area complete with locales of the remains. The last word had been that the 2 had grounded and the weather front was dissipating. He'd been gone about 2 hours. They both had bug suits, the medic offered. Great, I said. Just splendid. Suppose there's a creature down there that can go through plastic like... For the first time, the 3 lost their smug expressions. We destroyed your clothes, the medic said sheepishly. We figured... I railed at them for a couple of minutes, but it was mostly unfair. Moya's decision could be justified, too. They rustled up a uniform and helped me to astrogation. The remaining crewman was at comms. The freeze was beginning to wear off, and my leg burned. I alternated between berating myself and trying to think up an adequate explanation for the possible death or injury of 2 men ostensibly under my control. After several hours of sweat agony, Moya's voice came over the horn. He sounded tired. "We've done it. You'll be happy to know that we gave them an official burial." I could picture the little Mexican standing beside the long mound, head bowed, with the specter probably staring over his shoulder, going methodically through the complete memorial service, ending with, "And the whole galaxy is the sepulchre of illustrious men." "It's not much of a place, but the sun is shining now. Expect us shortly." "Are you sure you're all right?" I was propped on my elbows on the bunk in my cubicle, nursing the jangle in my leg. Maybe it was that, but I was confused as a mouse in a psych maze. "Why wouldn't I be?" Moya said. "And you wore the suits all the time?" "Affirmative. If you'd done the same." The medic showed with lab analyses. "There wasn't much of that stuff in you." "There wasn't much of that stuff in you," he said, "and I can't break it down. Too complex. You used the cobra venom analogy. Well, this makes that look as simple as mother's milk." He held up the stained pieces of uniform. Moya had kept his wits about him. "A combination of weather, soil, etc.," the medic said. "Completely innocuous." "About the toxin," I said. "Given time, could you work up an antivenin?" "Probably, but I'd need plenty, both time and toxin." He looked at me. "Oh, I see what you're getting at." He became professionally parochial. "In other words," I said, he snapped his fingers. "You know how it hits you." The confusion persisted, so I allowed the medic to use a pressure hypo. Hours later, I felt better. Physically. On the vid screen, the magnified surface of the insular mass seemed almost to beckon. Cyrene, I thought. Little remained of the weather front. Over the area of the plain and the rolling hills were meager wisps of clouds. Darkness again was creeping across the face of E.T. "That storm didn't amount to much," Moya said. Storm, I thought. Rain. "I know what I'd do," Moya continued. "I'd radiate and have done with it." The medic dissented on clinical curiosity grounds. "I can't reconcile things yet," I said, "but let's assume that it was a tragedy of errors. Let's say that what hit me killed them. But what was it? Where did it come from? And why? No, I'll have to go down again. It's my burden to find all the answers." Moya growled. "There's a time for stubbornness." I caught the rest of the crew staring at me. Their expressions were a motley. Back at the same old stand, open for business, looking at the pitiful alteration, feeling lonely, feeling vulnerable, too, despite the bug suit, Moya's parting blast still burning in my mind. He'd ferried me down to the hilltop in the long shadows of early morning. I'd had to order him to return to the starship. I stood now beside the communal mound. Moya had said, pointing down the hill, anger making him illogical, "These are the people you sold out when you transferred to Interstel. They could have used your kind of brains. Post-mortems aren't going to help them now." It was simple, wasn't it? Something on E.T. was a killer, quick and deadly. If it got any sort of clean shot at you, something visible, something big enough to make a mark, and not static like a thorn. A ground crawler? My pants leg had been tucked securely into my boot tops. A flyer? It would have to be strong enough to pierce a GS uniform and make an entrance into flesh, or to leave a scratch from a glancing blow, and I hadn't seen anything. But only a recent problem, and restricted to the area beyond the stream, and random. And terribly innocent. Innocent enough to be overlooked until it was too late. Think. I thought and came up with a brainful of nothing. Think again. Strong enough to pierce two thicknesses of cloth. It must have gone entirely through, although the overzealousness of the crew had removed any possibility of proof. How about the bug suit? Assume the plastic was protection enough. Wouldn't the wearer notice a blow? Or hear something? I'd felt, but not heard. But then the rain had been falling. No insect had hit me forcibly before. Moya and his helper had noticed nothing after a few meager drops of rain sibilantly soaking into the eager soil of Epsilon Terra. Whoever first mouthed that bit about cursing being the audible manifestation of a mediocre mind completely missed the point. There's something infinitely comforting in the crackle and sweep and roll of heartfelt invective. I left the site of the common grave and made it back to the hillside and Shuttler 4 as fast as discretion and terrain and my game leg would allow.
I am thinking, Moya grumbled over the comm. If these details are so important, why?
Don't blame Interstell, I said. The tapes were put together by GS headquarters.
Well, whoever. They should have included more information.
Thompson, I prodded.
Sure, I remember him. Big, awkward, slow-moving, always babbling about plants.
What kind?
All kinds.
But anything particular, something he wanted to extract something from.
Well, let's see. He brought back lots of sample specimens, but there was one he played with all the way home. It was an insectivorous or carnivorous species, as I recall.
Yes.
That produced a chemical he thought might prove useful if it could be extracted and concentrated or synthesized. Now, hold on. Are you trying?
Why not? And why didn't you mention this sooner?
For the simple reason. What got you off on this tangent?
Rain. The kid's diary said rain potential. The captain's log mentioned a surface weather front. And it rained just before I was hit.
I fail to see the connection, but think about this. It rained on the survey team I ferried here too. Not often, but more than once or twice, and nothing happened to them.
That was the trouble with firing off at half thrust. But there was still this nagging conviction. Rain plus vegetation equals death. I could picture Moya and the crew speculating that I'd taken complete leave of my senses. But sometimes you have to play the game blindly, by the seat of your pressure suit, as the pioneers stated it. I went to the shuttler's locker, located a canteen and a survival kit, filled it, and left the ship. I started where I'd found the largest collection of remains. Moya's memory had failed to particularize the plant, but I had enough evidence to negate indiscriminate baptism. I felt supremely foolish. For a while. My thoughts began to focus, and I recalled the little plant that had grown up through the hole in the pelvis. Casting about, I located adult specimens. They seemed to fit the requirements. Again, it struck me that they bore a familial kinship to a variety that occurred on the plane. I couldn't place the difference. Finally, I selected one about 2 feet tall. It was bulbous, thick-skinned, terminating in broad membranes that were clustered to form a rough funnel. Their inner surfaces were coated with a glutinous substance. The main body of the plant was studded with warty projections about the size of walnut halves, and just below the terminal funnel was a corona of tapering members like leaves beneath a bizarre blossom. They ended in sharp points, bore flimsy surface bristles, and seemed to serve as protection for the trap. I prodded the green and yellow mottled skin of the thing. It was tough, resistant, almost pneumatic. I had this sudden, strong feeling. Excuse me, gotta shuffle myself. About 10 feet away was a tree with a dull reddish overlapping... Oh, there is no A there. About 10 feet away was a tree with dull reddish overlapping bark segments on its trunk. There was a branch close enough to the ground to be reached if my leg would support the necessary spring. I tested the leg for leap and the branch for support. They held. I uncapped the canteen and sprinkled the remaining water over the plant, making sure that some reached both the funnel and the corona. I ran. Seconds later, perched monkey see, monkey do on the branch, I lost any lingering feeling of foolishness. I sat there for quite a while, sickened. I thought about the crew of 231 and the other pieces of the puzzle. One of them had to be arrogance, the natural arrogance of picked people that leads to a belief in corporeal immortality. Nothing can happen to me. You, maybe, but not me. Even though I knew exactly what to expect, it was impossible not to jerk back involuntarily with the others. We were in the starship, clustered around a bell jar. The jar contained a small specimen of the killer that I'd dug up gingerly and brought back for evidence. I'd introduced water into the jar, and the first reaction had just taken place. "Watch closely," I cautioned. Again, it happened. Innocently at first, and then too swiftly for the eye to follow. One of the little protuberances seemed to swell slightly. Ping! Something struck the wall of the bell jar hard enough to evoke a clear, sharp, resonant note. "I don't know the exact range of a mature specimen," I said grimly, but I saw leaves shake a good 20 yards away. "A seed," one of the crewmen breathed. "Nothing but a tiny, insignificant seed." Moya shook his head.
A deadly missile, son, wearing or containing a virulent poison, and people used to blather about curare."
I began to draw concentric arcs on the chart. I kept fetching water and testing and retreating all the way back to the plane. Pretty soon there's not going to be any place safe within miles of where these mutants can take root. Near the plane's camp, they're still innocuous, the original species. The propagation response is triggered by rain, all right, but the seeds just pop out, and of course, the poison is undoubtedly weak. A bother only to insects.
"But they weren't a problem,"
Moya interjected. "Time," I said. 5 years. Look here on the chart. I figured this to be the center, the first team's permanent camp on the hill. Now, what happened there? Heaters to destroy immediate vegetation, and radio frequency beams to kill insects and their larvae over a wider area. RF, don't you see? Cells react to certain portions of the radio spectrum. Some are destroyed, depending upon intensity. Some behave strangely. The marching protozoa, the dancing amoeba. In others, chromosomal aberrations occur, resulting in mutations. Remember the experiments with yeasts, garlic, grains? The growth of some microorganisms is stimulated by RF irradiation.
Then these glorified flytraps got mad at what was happening to their innards and decided to fight even harder for survival?
You're anthropomorphizing, I told Moya, but that's the way I see it. They just responded along already established lines. I paused and noted the expressions on the faces of the crew. Maybe it was that, and maybe it was the fact that my leg hadn't held up very well under the beating I'd given it. And maybe it was 12 good men. Anyway, I spent the next half hour pulling no punches. When I'd finished, Interstell had regained its reputation. Nobody, neither short-timer nor veteran, likes to hear dead comrades characterized as stupid. But I figured the crew would remember. Moya seemed unfazed, as if he'd paid scant attention to my speech. He rubbed his chin reflectively.
"The bug suits.
Were they any protection? At long range, probably. But up close? Moya apparently could think of nothing more to say. We radiated the danger area, left 231 for a pickup team, and headed for home. Fudge. 1 sec. Moya walked with me from quarantine to the Terra ramp. The leg still wasn't right.
"Did you mention me kindly in your report?"
Of course not, I told him. He chuckled and put his hand on my shoulder.
About Ben Stewart.
It's a nasty job, I said.
Did he rate getting cashiered?
He did, Tony.
Well, take care of yourself, Ivy.
The redhead again was on duty at the outbound desk. She ignored me. Xanadu. It was night, and there was a heavy fog. Standing alone on the open promenade outside the dome, I was grateful that I couldn't see the sky and the ominous stars that were not so far away. A couple of months later, I heard that Epsilon Terra had received its official name, Atri Terra. Atri from attrition. I've wondered ever since whether GS based the choice upon the secular or the theological definition. The end. And that was Attrition by Jim Wanamaker. I wish I knew when this was originally published and where. Here we go. This e-text was produced from Analog, November 1961. Extensive research did not uncover any evidence that the U.S. copyright on this publication was renewed. Minor spelling and typographical errors have been corrected without note. Anyway, that was a cute one. With that, though, I am going to have to call it a day. I got a late start, unfortunately. We will continue reading random stuff for the next 2 weeks, basically, as I put this thing through its paces and do some alternations. Butcher Raffi says he likes the audio quality. Good. It is an improvement. It sounded a bit clearer to me when I listened to some samples. I'm going to listen to this, admittedly, begrudgingly. Cringing every time I breathe or drink water or otherwise make a flub. But that is because I find myself deeply cringeworthy. Oh yes, I have such a high opinion of myself. Anyway, so yeah, the next 2 weeks, don't expect a particular schedule beyond the usual days and times. I'll be doing random things that I have in my collection. All of this was digital. I will probably do some stuff that's physical, in terms of actual physical books. Just reading excerpts. See how that goes. Alrighty. I gotta figure out proper distancing right now. I've got it pretty close to my face. Hello, Gabby. Thanks for tuning in. I am just wrapping up now. So I'm sorry if you just tuned in. But I do stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, starting at about 12 noon U.S. East Coast time, or Eastern Standard Time, whatever that translates to for you. I do so every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I think I said that. My brain is scattered. And yeah, usually my runtime is about 2 hours per installment, doing what I usually do. Some of these may be shorter. This one wound up being a little longer. Sorry, Gabby. This Wednesday, though. This Wednesday, next Monday as well. I'll still be around. I am putting a new/old microphone that I got like decades ago through its paces, and it's so far been pretty positive. It's just a matter of wrangling the thing. I've been meaning to upgrade the sound equipment I'm using for a while, because what I've done up until now is just a headset microphone, and it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. It's easy. It's convenient. This is a little less convenient, but it is still capable. I'm probably going to see if I can find like an arm for this thing, an armature for this thing. It's kind of heavy, so I don't know. But otherwise, it's working okay so far. Anyway, that will do it for today. More this Wednesday, where I'll try some excerpts from physical books that I have, and or some comics that I've got lying around. Might do the first chapter or two of, what's that series called? Finder, by Carla Speed McNeil, which I'm very fond of, deeply, deeply fond of. It's very good stuff. Anyway, we'll see. Where was I? Right. see you all later. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other, and I'll see you all next time. Toodaloo. And stuff.